Thanks for joining. Hi, Gulam. Great to see you here. Um, Super excited getting started our day with our HBS fellows and alums. So both Ha and I are actually HBS as well. Ha, what year were you?
2000. So it's going to be
2000.
25-year reunion.
Amazing.
Indeed.
And I've been 2013. Um, Welcome, everyone. Super happy to have you here. Han and I are going to talk about portfolio career today. Uh, and as we kind of getting started, I would love to ask everyone if there's any passion project or something that you would like to turn to revenue stream. So let's put it um, on the chat, or if someone wants to unmute and go ahead and talk about that, because that's going to be a lot of what we're going to talk about today. How do we turn different interests and skills we have into kind of revenue stream? So if there's any passion project or interest that you have that you want to turn it into revenue stream, please put it in the chat or just unmute yourself. And I put the prompt up here too. All right. And it would be great if people can put in where you're dialing from, which city, which country, if you have international group joining us. Does anyone want to unmute and tell us where you're dialing from or what's a passion project that you want to turn into revenue? Come on, we have a bunch of HBS people. We are not shy, right?
No. We're going to have to cold call, I think.
Yeah, I forgot that skill. Um, all right, let me see, monitoring the chat. People joining from Boston, Seattle, San Antonio, welcome. Vietnam, fantastic. Bay Area,
Wow, Vietnam.
love it. Always international audience with HBS. Side business, coaching business, love that. Thanks for sharing that. If anyone else has a passion project that they want to turn into a revenue stream, please put it on. And with that, let's kind of get started. I wanted to, first of all, introduce myself and Ha, and I wanted to make sure we get to cover what we have lined up here. I'm Yasi Baiani. I actually have the honor of being part of Harvard Business School Women Association board. And in terms of background, I have been product leader and exec for over a decade. And about 2 years ago, I started my own company, Raya Advisory, where we basically provide product and AI advisory services in addition to executive hiring for high growth companies. And as I shared earlier, I was at HBS in 2013, graduating. Ha, do you want to also introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ha Nguyen, and I'm HBS 2000. Essentially, my backstory, graduated in 2000 during the height of the dot-com boom, decided to move out to Silicon Valley and be part of the internet. And so I joined eBay early. I was there from 2000, 2005, then spent the rest of my career at early stage startups, did a bunch of VP product roles. And then in 2016, I shifted into the world of venture capital, spent almost 5 years in venture, took a marketplace COO role during the pandemic. Loved that role and that company and everything about it, but I wasn't mission and values aligned with my founder and CEO. And so after 2 years, I left. And that was sort of when I decided, upon soul searching and reflection, that I no longer had any interest in joining any more startups, and I didn't want to go back into venture. And to me, it was the perfect time to bet on myself. And so I recruited a business partner. I started a consulting practice about 2.5 years ago. But if anybody saw my LinkedIn post yesterday, even though I've started with the title fractional COO, I no longer consider myself a fractional COO. I feel like I have way too many interests and too many other activities that I'm pursuing. What Yasi said, passions that I'm working to monetize. Then I'm like, okay, actually, what I'm doing is I'm building a portfolio career. And it was really Yasi that introduced me to the term. So super excited to share with you about my experiences and my learnings and any wisdom and insight. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ha. And Ha and I kind of connected in a lot of these topics just a couple of years ago, but we became fast friends because we share a lot of same interests and focus on community and kind of lifting up people around us. And we are super excited to kind of talk about this topic and share our kind of experience and background. Ha shared her story. And for me, like I was product exec and leader for a decade, and then I love that, but I've always been doing something in addition to that. I kind of felt like, I was early employee at Fitbit, and over time I was overseeing all of our software experiences. But when I was building my own team there, I realized a lot of people come interview for product roles with me, but they don't really understand what that entails. So that kind of motivated me to teach product management at UC Berkeley. So I designed a team and ended up teaching to MBA students. So I was doing that while I was doing my full-time job at UC Berkeley. I also started like tipping my toes into angel investment and start.
Yeah, so can you unmute yourself? Sorry. I went in
Sorry.
unmute.
Yeah. Okay,
There we
perfect.
go.
All set.
Sorry.
Yeah, all good. So I ended up doing multiple things in addition to my full-time job. And I was always thinking that, is that only me or is it like other people? And then that's ultimately kind of got me familiar with the portfolio career, which is something we're going to talk about today. And I think a lot of you probably know Christina Wallace. She's a HBS professor and teacher and lecturer, but also she wrote a book, The Portfolio Life. And that was really fascinating. I highly encourage everyone to read it. It's a super easy and fast read. You can probably read it in a couple of hours. But it's a really interesting concept because what she talks about is we all have different parts of our interests and capabilities and skills. And maybe you all already lived a life that you feel like you already had multiple careers, right? You start from finance or consulting, then you ended up in health tech or some, fashion or e-commerce. Then now maybe you're doing some other, types of roles. I feel like we all kind of move and have different parts of our career, but how she kind of put it in place in this book really made me think, oh my God, like a lot of us are actually living portfolio life and portfolio career. We have different interests, we have different skills. And Ha and I started like very much talking about that. And that became a lot of inspiration for us for this conversation. But the gist of it is we like the day and age that someone will go into one company and stay there for 20 years, has passed, and people have not only different companies that they will join, but maybe totally different careers um, that they build. And I would even encourage everyone think about this more in this kind of last couple of years, particularly with all the shift in kind of the industry, a lot of changes in the structure of the companies and large companies, a lot of layoffs, a lot of AI coming into work. Maybe we all end up working with AI agents as our colleagues and coworkers. So becoming having more kind of control over our career and life became even more important. And Christina very well talks about that in her book, which she wrote multiple years ago. So I think, traditional career ladder looks like the one to the left. Expectation is you start somewhere, grow in your career, grow your skills, go up the ladder until like, wherever your aspiration and inspirations are. But like this kind of portfolio model is different. Like it kind of has its own turns and twists. And you may kind of go to a particular field and then change path and change route. Or you may have multiple job or roles or things that you're involved with all at the same time. um, who's kind of resonating with this kind of portfolio career model? Like you already feel like you already have that anyways. Like if you already have that, kind of raise your hand or put it in the chat that yes. I'm curious to see how many people feel they already have that. This is not something new. Okay. Put it in the chat. I'm curious to see how many people. Yes, I like that, Sheila. You're already kind of resonating, Alexandra. Great. I'm kind of monitoring, see how many people already are doing it, and it's not necessarily a new concept. Great. I love that, Elena. Um, so yeah, so I think a lot of us are already doing that, just kind of being more aware of it. I think we just talked about that in terms of the shifts we are also seeing. Some of the kind of reasons I personally decided more deliberately build a portfolio career. First of all, is like we all went to business school. We all know some basics of finance. Rule number one is diversify your portfolio. but our careers are the most kind of common in terms of like revenue generation and income generation for all of us. But we all kind of have been taught to put all our eggs into one basket, commit to a company, grow into that company for multiple years. And that's the path that is kind of accepted and encouraged. But when we see the kind of risk, commitment of the companies, particularly in the last few years, but some of us have seen multiple cycles like 2008 cycle and prior to that 19 kind of dot-com cycles. Companies don't have as much commitment. When they need us, then they need our skills, we are there. But if they don't, they can do pretty radical reshuffles. And we've seen that. And with AI, I think that's just getting amplified. It was surprising for me to see still Meta and Microsoft earlier this year have major layoffs while their businesses are doing really well. So companies are fragile. And I personally have seen not only some of these recent shifts, but some regulations or some of these kind of aspects could totally change the trajectory of companies. So that was kind of in my mind as I was thinking about my more deliberate shift towards like more portfolio career. The other thing is like we all are in this, dispensable. It's very easy for a company to say, you leave, someone else will come, right? And how could we make our own career more bulletproof? I'm not saying portfolio career is the only answer, but it's definitely one of the ways that you at least have multiple options at any given time, and you won't put all your eggs in one basket. The other thing that personally for me was really important, 2 years ago, my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I had an offer to join a company as a chief product officer, hyper growth company, super demanding. I was super excited about the opportunity, but the company was based in Texas. And I didn't really see myself with my mom just getting diagnosed, and I have like 2 little kids, me being on the plane every week to do that kind of travel. And they told me, you don't need to travel, you can be fully remote. This is fully remote executive role. But I knew for me to succeed, for my team to succeed, for the executives to work effectively together, I needed to be there quite often. So I personally made a deliberate decision that overall the bigger picture is more important for me than just kind of taking a big role. And I decided to turn down that offer, but it was very hard. I would say that it's, personal stuff definitely ruled the career decision, which was one of the first time in my career I had to do such a big, shift and decision. But in hindsight, I'm glad I did that. And I think something that Ha taught me even more about this kind of whole concept, that the why and the drive and the magic of why we all doing what we're doing, and how do we kind of seek that, and how do we find more joy and purpose in our work versus just doing the work. And definitely, I feel like both of us doing this portfolio career and spending our time working with partners or companies or clients that are more aligned with our purposes and how we want to do work, definitely provides a lot of that. Is it without its own flaws and challenges? 100% not. And we're going to talk about that. So this is kind of a sample of how we can each build a portfolio career, so that give people some ideas of what do we even mean by portfolio career, which hopefully kind of get you thinking. Ha and I both have our own businesses at this point, so that's part of our portfolio, and our, even our businesses are diversified in some ways. We both do different things under our businesses. But some people may have full-time job. They may still have even executive role. They may have a pretty demanding role or any type of engagement that is the main source of their income. And that's great. But what we are encouraging people to do in this kind of portfolio career is think about other ways that you can also build some income streams, right? It might be a passion. Like for instance, when I was at Fitbit, I was teaching at UC Berkeley. So that was one revenue stream for me. I was also investing in companies, even though that's a much longer term kind of payoff. It was, at least an opportunity for me to have some outcome later on. So there are many different ways. Like I always think, like even the brick and mortar businesses, maybe your neighbor wants to start a gym or bakery. Like, can you invest some money into that and create some revenue stream for yourself? Part-time roles. A lot of you are very much kind of looking, or you already might be in board paid or unpaid roles, teaching courses, freelancers, and kind of advising companies. So those are all kind of fall into that portfolio model. And also there are many ways to generate content. I think it's harder, but like it's definitely an opportunity for, newsletter or paid, podcast sponsorship. There are many different ways you can actually monetize content if you kind of put the effort into that. And then the other aspect is investments, which I think as HBS, I'm hoping everyone is very savvy about that, but kind of thinking about that more rigorously and create some revenue stream, like investing in stocks that will give dividends, like have, small real estate investment that could potentially be cash flow positive. So all of those could be part of any of our portfolios. We all could have different strengths and opportunities that could lean us towards one versus the other. But the whole purpose is hopefully everyone's kind of more rigorously thinking about building a portfolio career. So these are some of the benefits which we talked about really in terms of what are the great things about having portfolio companies, portfolio careers. So I won't go through that, but I wanted to kind of pass it to Ha to talk about the challenges, because this sounds great and it almost feels like, rainbows and unicorns, but it's not like that, right? There are a lot of challenges as we all are building a portfolio career as well. And she's gonna talk about that. I'll take it away.
Thanks, Yasi. Why don't you, if you don't mind driving the slides for me, that'd be
Absolutely.
great. Um, okay, so I think this should be pretty obvious, but for any of us who might be going off on our own, right, not being employed by a company, it is so much about selling. So it's funny, as a product leader, I was a product leader for 16 years. Like, I didn't have to even ever think about selling anything. I was heads down, building, managing teams. Even as a COO, I was heads down, building the company. Um, and then you go off on your own and you realize, oh my gosh, like nobody knows me outside of folks who have worked with me. And I need to start really talking about myself and building a brand and doing things that might make many of us uncomfortable. What do you mean I have to sell? I'm not a salesperson. Actually, you do need to be a salesperson if you want to be successful, if you're going out on your own. Um, I shifted my perspective a while ago around this, which is I actually don't feel like I'm selling anything. What I'm doing is I'm talking about who I am, the things that I'm passionate about, the types of things that I believe in, or the companies that I want to work with. And if you're your true authentic self, people who are also interested in the same things will gravitate towards you. And so I think a lot about it as being relationship driven, not so much sales driven. But at the same time, you do have to exercise the muscle of like, writing content on LinkedIn. Yasi is probably somebody I admire the most about how she's been able to build her brand on LinkedIn. You do need to constantly be going out there and talking about yourself and what you do, and how somebody might be able to help you. So I think I try to leave every meeting just making sure that folks know what it is that I'm doing, and making sure that like if they see opportunities that might fit my skills or my experience, feel free to make the introduction all the time. So you just need to start building the muscle around it. But it is something, especially if you're going out on your own, that you need to start thinking about doing. Okay, this is the big one, financial stability and cash flow. I do believe that if you're going to go out off on your own and build a portfolio career, you probably need at least 6 months to a year of extra savings or cash um, set aside to weather the storm and to start building your business. It might take a while. So, for some of us, like it'll happen immediately. And for others, we're going to have to go out and find those first sets of clients or sort of that business that we want to run and invest in. But it may be that for the first 6 months, 9 months, you might not be generating any income until you start proving yourself and earning some business. The other thing is that not, unfortunately, I do think there's parts of the US that make it really, really hard for people to start off and become an entrepreneur, right? So you were paying for your own health care costs. I know for my family, it cost me $3,500 a month, which is a lot of money. That's like 40,000 a year that I need to be setting aside for healthcare for the family. Obviously, you're not going to get paid for your vacations. I'm on spring break this week. I'm not going to get paid for it. And I am actually doing a little bit of work on the evenings to continue to build up the business. This was the most surprising to me. because I'm self-employed, I now am the employer, and so I am paying out-of-pocket employer taxes, which is crazy. I never thought about when I was employed by a company that they paid the taxes for me, and now I'm paying it. There are ways to mitigate from a tax perspective. I turned my business more recently from an LLC to an S corp. And so that helped in saving some employer taxes, and happy to chat with anybody around that. But yeah, that it was kind of a painful lesson in year one of me starting my business. And then of course, there's out-of-pocket expenses. When you're employed by a company, SaaS fees, like they pay for it. Right now, I'm like, oh, do I need to, get that other AI tool, or pay for Zoom, or pay for all of these different tools and systems that I need to run my business? Actually, I do. So I need to think about that a little bit more. Okay, and then final slide, a lot of juggling. So um, context switching is difficult, especially when you're building a portfolio career. So I might be juggling multiple clients at a time, working fractionally with some, advising some others, but on top of that, working on Maven course, figuring out how to find and carve the time to work on that, since it's not the most urgent or burning priority. I also have some board roles, and so that takes up a chunk of time. I'm doing some investing, and so all of these requires context switching. Some of the stuff that I'm doing, I don't enjoy doing, like some of the taxes we just due earlier this week, and so just getting all of that paperwork done for the accountant. There's just so much in any given day that I'm like, okay, I have 7 things that I'm working on, and I can only get 2 or 3 of them done, and figuring out what's the right set of priorities, how to carve the time, and then and then how to balance it while still doing an excellent job for the founders that I'm supporting. Okay, so what does my portfolio career look like? So it consists of all of these different components. So when I first started 2.5 years ago, I started with consulting. So 90% of my income right now is fractional consulting. So I support a couple of founders at a time, actually being hands-on, working inside the business. I, during the role of like a missing executive, or even like an interim COO for my companies. I also have a few founders that I advise on the side. And then I wrote down agency here. I didn't plan to build an agency, but as my clients were trying to increase the scope of my responsibilities, I knew that I couldn't handle the additional volume. And so I told them that. And I told them that I would bring in my team to support me. And this is what it would look like, and this is what it would cost them. And so I was like, oh, I guess I am kind of building out an agency, even though I hadn't planned to. Separate from that, I built a small referral network. So part of the referral network, we share learnings and insights with each other. We're all in the same Slack group together. We do once a month calls with each other where we talk about how we're leveraging AI in our in our client work, or or like, yeah, how do we leverage the best tools. So we're sharing learnings, but we also are sharing referrals with each other, and collecting 10% fees when we do refer that out. And then I'm running a couple of experiments with a couple of SaaS companies where if I make intros to folks in my network, and those deals close, I end up getting 20% of it. My business partner and I are working on a Maven course. It keeps getting delayed, unfortunately, because the balancing of all the different things I have going on is real. And so, but that is planned for later this year. And then one of the things that we're touring with, because I get asked all the time, oh, will you coach me on building a fractional business, or will you coach me on this or that? Is do we do something where it's more of a revenue share model? So I'll coach you on how to build your business, and in exchange, it's 10% of the first 6 months of revenue that you make, something like that. So something that I'm toying with. Haven't quite launched it yet, so ask me in 6 months or a year if it worked, but that's something I'm thinking about. Between me and my husband, we have a bunch of investments, a bunch of real estate investments in the Bay Area, and then I do have an angel portfolio. Um, Something new that just kicked off a couple months ago is I'm now doing executive searches with my friend Deb Liu. We just finished our first COO search for a founder CEO friend of ours. And then we'll probably start the next search pretty soon. And then finally, I do a lot of thought leadership. Most of it is unpaid, but it's all lead gen for all of the work that I have above. And then I have a couple of board roles too. Those are nonprofit boards, not paid, but I do think that what I'm building here is a flywheel, and that it all feeds on each other. So Yasi, do you want to share some of your?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try to keep it short so we can kind of switch to conversation and be able to answer any questions. I think I already shared my business does kind of product and AI advising at Raya Advisory. We have a team to support that, and we continue to build that team. And then we have arm of our business that does executive recruiting. I do, paid engagement for speaking. I love, being able to share my thoughts. And at this point, like there are people who actually are, paying us to do that. And then we have referral, fee for businesses that refer people to us. And same thing, like we do we send businesses to other relevant and complementary companies. And then, investments and also angel investment and real estate. So that's kind of my portfolio. And I would say that it has been built over a good 15 years. So I encourage people to think about to start, what is the first next thing you can potentially, take on to start adding. And it might be something you do, but you do it for paid opportunity, or you pick up something that is an interest and turn it to maybe a small business or revenue stream. Of course, like it's a step by step effort. Now I would love to kind of stop sharing and actually open up for conversation, get people's reaction, thoughts. Does this make sense? Doesn't? Whatever that you wanted to kind of share with us, we would love to have conversation with everyone.
Or if you have questions, the Q&A part of this is always the best part.
Yes.
On this a few different times now.
And feel free to go off mute and start talking, or raise your hand and start talking.
And Katie might have.
Yeah, so I think, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. I have contractors here, so I'm trying to mute everything. What I think is, so I'm in my portfolio, a career chapter as well, or sometimes they call it mosaic chapter, in doing consulting work and corporate paid board work as well. And just so for discussion, and this is a great group for discussion, is what was interesting, what I hear, particularly how your thoughts around, you've got a whole range of different things that you're going after. And there's almost a strategy, if you think of us each individually as what is your personal, if you will, business strategy. And, you can have a very focused approach, which is, hey, I'm going to really just take whatever my key skill is. In my case, it's strategy and transformation and financial institutions. I'm very focused, and all of my work revolves around that from a consulting basis, from a board perspective. And say, all right, well, if that's your highest and best use, because let's, by the way, it's assumed that you're actually still trying to maximize income, right? I think if you can have different goals in your strategy as well. So, but I think that's an interesting debate around how diversified do folks want to be in their portfolio, right? And maybe some of it, as you say, is more further afield. Well, okay, that's not for optimizing income, or but that kind of personal diversification question, I think, is an interesting conversation to have, to say, all right, where's the optimal mark there, and it depends on what you're trying to optimize. If you hey, I want to really keep interested in these various things, but maybe it's going to reduce my earning potential because I'm getting more diffused. versus you say, no, I want to maybe cut off some of the things that aren't the 80/20, right? And then just really double down. So it's just for debate as we, in discussion, right? As you talk about like, what is your portfolio strategy, if you will?
Strategy, yes. That's a great point. And actually, I want to update these slides based on that. So I'll talk a little bit about my experience and sort of why I went into all of these different other areas. So as I mentioned, I started doing fractional consulting. The focus of what me and my business partner focused on is strategy and operations.
Yeah.
One of the and then I just let the market pull me where it pulled me. So a lot of my founders were like, oh, wow, you have such a huge network that you built over the years, because I've been a community builder for 10 years. Can you start introducing me to folks in your network to help me grow my business? And so I ended up shifting into a lot of growth and evangelism work. And then that sort of then led to like search, right? So search was like, hey, I actually have this huge network of VP product leaders, including Yasi, but thousands of others as well. I was already making intros to my founder friends, to folks in my network and not getting paid on it. And then my friend Deb Lou said, that happens with me too. So we're like, oh, well, maybe we should figure out a way to get paid on it. So it was a natural extension to shift into search. And so when I sort of, if I were to kind of like think about, okay, like I'm working on all these things, but what's sort of the bigger theme? It's like, oh, my theme is community building, network, and how do I leverage sort of my vast network in Silicon Valley to help my founders, to help to help my network in terms of like finding jobs or opportunities. So that's sort of the theme. And I enjoy it. Like I didn't realize it before, but I do consider myself a super connector. So I guess the super connector theme is what ties my entire portfolio career together. My final thought, which I meant to talk about during the formal presentation, was that I say no to a bunch of things that I'm just not interested in. So even if it is money, if I don't feel like I'm good at it, or if I just am not that interested in it, I'll say no. And so I think it really is important to like put the money aside if you can, and think about what is work that will fuel you, pursue that. Like Yassi said, maybe start with some unpaid stuff, but then over time, figure out how to monetize that. And I think that just has served me really well. I think that served Yassi really well. And that's sort of how I would advise anybody who's kind of getting started with this, which is like, figure out the things that you want to do and try to figure out how to do more of it. Even if it's unpaid, figure out how to monetize it over time. Then just don't do the things that that you're just not interested in and drain your energy. And then you'll figure it out. Like the strategy might emerge from experimentation. So that's what happened with me. I didn't necessarily define the strategy up front. I did a bunch of experiments and I was like, oh, the strategy is that, I have a huge network as a community builder, as an AI, as a non-AI super connector. How do I sort of bring all this together and make some money off of it?
Right, which is right, and which is just like that is your competitive advantage, and which is fantastic that you've been able to grow from that.
I just wanted to mention there's some questions. I don't know if you can see them in the chat regarding pricing and marketing and whatnot.
Definitely. I'm monitoring them, Deborah, so I'm going to answer them in a minute. Just one thing to add, Katie, to your question, because strategy a lot of times is where we all start, like what's the whole point, how we approach it, right? So I want to make sure like if you can also think about this slightly different from the perspective of where people start. I would think about it in a few ways. One is, what are you trying to optimize for? Sometimes you're optimizing for flexibility. Sometimes you're optimizing for monetization. And what's the highest revenue income stream or opportunity for me, right? The other piece is, the interest, right? Like, is passion driving me versus like, I need to make money. So like, think about what are you optimizing for? And what's the ultimate goal? And the second piece is what's your competitive advantage? Because probably Ha's competitive advantage is very different than yours, than Gloom, than Deborah, than me, right? So we all have our own kind of things we've done over time in, you know, our career that give us our angle. So your angles probably almost definitely will be different than Ha or mine. So think about that and kind of build upon that and say, okay, if these are all things I can do, which one I'm trying to optimize for why? And then what gives me the better chance of success? Start from there. Does that make sense? Hopefully it's a good starting point. And let's talk about some of the questions. I saw a lot of great questions people have in the chat. So talk about how you create your target market and customer. Like, how you want to talk about that first? How do we think about that?
So most of my experience when I was working in, say, the corporate world was actually working with startups, like Series A through Series C startups was always my sweet spot. And so the ICP made a lot of sense to focus there. I have a ton of marketplace experience, and so many of my founders are marketplaces. And I saw somebody wrote in the comments, like, be very careful about doing any unpaid work. So actually, if I do unpaid work, it's really just an experiment just to see if I like it before actually charging for it. But for all of my consulting work, I only work with founders who have raised at least, 8 million or more, because they have to be able to afford to pay me. So I actually don't take equity. So I know a lot of people will start by taking equity. I do believe, having been in venture, that equity is a lottery ticket, and it's great, but it might not pay off with 10 plus years if it pays at all. And yet I'm still, this is my full-time income now, and I need to pay the bills. And so I'm only working with founders that have raised some money. And so that's, and then in terms of the product or service offering, again, it's sort of strategy and operations. That's what my business partner's superpower is. And then over time, I've shifted to a lot of growth work because of my network and sort of my superpowers and in connecting with people. So I think that's just personal for me. All of you kind of just need to go do that same exercise of, like, what are you really, really great at? What does the market value? Where do you sort of see gravitational pull, if you will? And then maybe start there.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of you ask about pricing, which I think is also to some extent related to kind of targeting and pricing. It really depends, right? Because it depends on what you do. For instance, let's say if you wanted to put a course out, right? I feel like the first step is like do some research to see what is the kind of proxy and benchmarking for the work that you're trying to do. If you're doing consulting hourly, go and do some research to say, okay, what's the ultimate part of that spectrum, which is McKinsey, Bain hourly rate, and then what's like individual person with no brand and no background that you have, and then somewhere in between. Do some research, right? And then you come up with your initial pricing. And a lot of times initially when we started, or I started, I used to kind of price ourselves. And one of the VCs who basically is mentoring me said, you're so wrong in your pricing. First of all, like, you're giving discounts so people feel like your offering is discounted. The second thing is pricing. The good pricing strategy is you keep going higher and higher every time you interact with the next customer until someone say, I don't pay you. That's your bound for your pricing, which was an interesting point and made me bolder in some of our next conversation to change our pricing. So it's an iterative process, both your packaging and pricing, I would say, but also what's the kind of band in whatever you're offering. But I would say, like, from the approach perspective, start doing some research, in the area that you're trying to kind of enter. Understand what are the general pricing and packaging models. Start from there. You don't want to innovate, in terms of pricing, especially if you're a newcomer in the market. Understand the band, start putting it out there and see how people react. And you can always, get some feedback from people. If you lose a deal or lose an opportunity, go back to them and say, can you share with me what was the kind of deciding factor? If end up being pricing, your price has been too high. But I'm kind of like, in these types of businesses, it's more about what what value you offer versus pricing. But at the end of the day, pricing matters too, especially if you're dealing with larger companies, which have a lot of, options.
Just to add to that, so my husband's a lawyer, and then as I was starting in consulting, he gave me really, really good advice. So Yasi, very similar. He said that, like, that your most valuable asset is your time. It is okay to ask for what you're worth and then to walk away, because whatever you say yes to, it's going to be an opportunity cost you your time. You won't be able to say maybe yes to something else. And so with my very first client, actually, when he asked me about pricing, I threw out a number that I actually just didn't even think that he would go for. And he said, okay, like he didn't blink. Like where he negotiated was, he negotiated, it's like, oh, can we at least try it out for just a month or two? Because he hadn't worked with me before. And so 2 years later, I'm still working with him, which is so interesting to me. But that sort of set my rate, which was like, oh, I didn't think that he would say yes. I thought I would have to negotiate down. But he said yes. And that placed where my rate was. And then now that I don't have capacity, the next founder, that I talk to, I probably will raise my rate. And it's been about 2 years. And so I probably will raise my rate there. With my executive search, I only finished one, but we did give a discount to that founder. She's a seed stage founder. And so instead of charging like 100,000, which is like the market rate, it's 100 to 150,000, but at the seed stage, 100,000 is probably as high as you can go. We gave her a discount 50,000. And that was really so that I could figure out like whether I like this work. And then if we made any mistakes, that I would feel not so bad charging sort of the market rate. But the next search will be $100,000 search. Like that like is very obvious to me. And by the way, we closed that first search in 3 weeks because of the strength of my and Deb's network. So I do think you can experiment with pricing. I don't think, sometimes it makes sense to start lower, and sometimes it makes sense to, to start really high and see what the feedback is.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And here one other thing, because we have Golom here, and she was like very the conversation I had with her last spring in the HBS Women Association conference was very prominent for me. So I will share that because because she's here and it was very important for me. But another thing to do as you're kind of building your business or business mindset of how to do some revenue streams that you're kind of responsible for versus being an employee in a company, always, first of all, like pay attention and in good conversation, take notes and ask questions, maybe 5 steps ahead. We just started our business, but she gave me an opportunity to understand how does exit look like for private equities and what multiples we need to have on our revenue, our profit, and how do I need to build a business to be attractive to that. I remember I like literally took note when she left our conversation. I messaged it to myself and say, okay, this is where we need to be. And that's how I'm operating today, even though I feel like we might be years away from any exit. But those data points, which I would probably not be able to get it easily from anyone, she just was sharing with me. So do the same thing, like be very kind of inquisitive and aware, and always like take notes for things that matter, because guess what, like in 2 years you'll probably forget what multiple she said, right? So that's also another good way to have some proxy for numbers and pricing and those types of things, which are very much not written anywhere, right? Like for instance, share some data points, jot that down, right? Okay, great. And someone asked about what does our day look like? Oh God, that's an interesting question. And every day is so different. Like I'll share my kind of way of operating. First of all, like I do a lot. I'm super focused and I'm very much of a prioritizer. So that's why my husband knows if he wants anything gets done, would it be booking a trip or paying for kids' classes, he needs to give me deadline. If he tell me at one point book a trip, it will never happen. I'm very much of a deadline person. So I always also tell that when I'm working with other people, say, if you really truly need something from me, give me deadline. So I always prioritize things that matter, because particularly in a portfolio, career model, you have thousands of things going at any given time. So every day I have to wake up, which customer is more important, which area is more important. I also think about opportunities both from revenue perspective, from impact perspective on our business, what kind of client matters more at any given time and where I should pay my attention. And unfortunately, some of the non-revenue driving things will be always lower in the list, like content generation or things I wanted to do that kind of sits on the lower in the list. That's how I operate. I still actually do a lot of our operation and administrative part of our business. It's been so far, I would just fit it in as I find time. But recently I start blocking my Friday afternoons for just doing kind of administrative stuff, sending invoices, paying taxes, paying employees and other things. So it depends on what you do and how you kind of approach it. But that's my day to day. Maybe how you share yours, because I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of calendaring. So if it's not calendar probably won't get prioritized and won't get done. And so it's easy when you think about client work. So if you're juggling two different clients, right? I mean, so you sort of calendar like what days or what blocks of time you're going to work for one client versus the other. But I do also calendar thought leadership into and I do calendar things like yeah, well, if I have to do like taxes or even just like, I mean, just some silly stuff too. Like, you know, it's just like, it has to get added in. I work a lot. So I will often work till midnight. So it's so funny when people sort of say that like, you know, that they want to go into a portfolio career for like life work balance. Like, I don't feel like right now I have a lot of balance, but it's because I feel like I'm also in the early part of building this, right? So 10 years in, I hope to work less hard and still not have to like drop income significantly. But when you're in the early part of building, just like building a startup, like I just think it's a lot of work and hustle and a lot of hours. Over time, hopefully that mix shifts. And so yeah, so my day looks different all the time. And it's just balanced across all of the different things I listed on that slide.
Yeah, that's great. And there's a question about how do we shift conversation with, prospects and, relationships and customers from mentoring and coaching relationships to asking for payment. And I think that's really hard. And it was hard for me at the beginning because I used to always advise people along the way. When I was an operator, people will come, friends, people in my network, like, should I hire CPO or VP of product? Why not? Like, often that comes to me. I help them to kind of navigate that and hire the right person. How should we build our product? Why our product team is not high performing? How should we kind of identify the problems? I always get involved, help them. Sometimes they gave me shares. Sometimes I would just do it just because, right? Friends, relationships. And when I started Raya, I knew that there's a lot of opportunities, similar to what Ha was saying. People give me shares for 10 years exit potential, that shares mean something, but I couldn't leave off of that. So I wanted to test. One of my first thing I wanted to do with my business was like, how can I test and make sure there's monetization opportunity for what I wanted to do? So that was my rule number one. I test that for 6 months. But it's harder if you're not doing it officially as a business, right? So I would always like, I would say it's part of branding yourself, like brand yourself as a, either paid advisor or fractional person or whatever that is. Like, find a way to, position and package yourself that, hey, I'm doing this for payment. I'm not doing it just because that's a lot of times, of course, every entrepreneur would love to get all of your advices. All of you have so much experience and expertise, but your time also is not free. And now I'm actually very rigorous. Like, opportunities come to me that are not the hourly pay we want, or honestly, the size of the project that I wanted to spend brain power on, because as Ha mentioned, every time you take on something, it still takes a lot of mental effort to make sure you show up to meetings or make sure you're prepared. So now I have to, if something is fitting into small size project but still takes an amount of hours, most likely I will say no to them, even though it's really, really hard. But I learned to do that just because I need some mental power for other things. And if I kind of take up my time with a lot of small things, I can do major projects. So kind of like position yourself that way and say no to a few people. I feel like that change your brand to some extent, that you're doing this for real or doing it in another capacity.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I love everything you said. One more thing that I'll add is like my business partner and I run a process, like and so when we talk to a founder for the first time, we will assess in that first call whether the fit is there, including whether they have the money, that they can pay us. But we will also share it with them up front in the very first call. This is how we work, and so how we work is if we feel like this was, that there might be something here, that we might want to work together, we'll schedule a second call, and that second call will be 1 hour. It'll be a deep dive into their business where we'll understand what their needs and pain points are. From that, we will create a draft proposal and share it with them in advance and schedule the third call. And in that third call, we'll get the feedback in terms of, whether they have any adjustments, whether the pricing makes sense, et cetera. And by that point, they have to decide yes or no, whether or not they want to move forward. But because we've defined that upfront, we set that expectation upfront that this is paid, and this isn't just free advice. And I will say that, like, at least what we found in our consulting work is 1 in 6 founders that we talk to lead to a paid engagement. So, there's going to be a lot of disqualification in that first call because maybe they are too early for us. They haven't raised any money. They weren't expecting to be paid. Great, let's keep in touch. Let's check in periodically, etc. Because things do change. Like, they do raise money later, or they might be in a position to hire us later. And then by the time it gets to the proposal phase, it's about 50%. What we find, 50% conversion of like 1 out of every 2 proposals ends up leading to a yes, a paid engagement. So think about it as almost like a sales funnel. But you'll probably have to have lots and lots of conversations. Not all of it will lead to business, but have a good CRM. Surprisingly, some of those first conversations might not lead to business now, but might lead to business down the road. And we have seen that in our business.
That makes sense. There's like 2 really good questions. I want to make sure we answer them. First is like, we get so many requests for coffee chat or pick your brain. I can't tell you how much of that I get. And initially it was nice, but like right now what I have is my time. Time is my commodity, is my value proposition, is my product, right? So I'm very, very protective of my time. And only do things that just fit into the larger picture, even as part of like business development or just being helpful. For instance, this morning I did a call with someone who was introduced to me from a friend for just guiding this person for career decision. I still do some of that. Not that I don't do that, because I truly believe that is part of my responsibility to help next generation find their path or support them. But I'm more clear about which ones I do, which ones I don't, and how much of them I do, because otherwise my days can get filled up with coffee chats or conversation or advice to people. So I'm more selective, but also I ask people, a lot of times people reach out to me, at least on LinkedIn. And I almost always read all of my LinkedIn messages, even random ones in emails, because I truly believe sometimes people may want something that I'm the right person to help them. And if I feel like, okay, this person has something to tell me, or I have something to tell them, I always respond and say, hey, I noticed you add me. Is there anything I can help with? Or, hey, I noticed you wanted to meet. What is specifically you think I could be helpful with? And they will tell me. And if I can help them, I'll help them. If not, I won't. But I still also like ignore a bunch of them because I really feel like I can't respond to every single person. But I do think that you want to take advantage of those, because some of those most random coffee chats could be something really interesting in your career. I really believe in that, but you need to be selective on how you kind of filter out and ask people about their intention. Some people come to me for investment. Okay, do I want to meet with this person for investment? But the same person may wanted to hire us for recruiting executive for them. Okay, yeah, that might be interesting for that person based on their profile, but I may not be interested in investing in them. Like you just kind of have to evaluate, and that's my lens and for my evaluation. And I'm sure we all have ours. But like you need to have some filters, but also not responding to anyone doesn't sound great, because you can take advantage of a lot of relationship and opportunities you're building that will be great for both sides. So why do you ignore all of that? I don't know if you have any good filtering mechanisms.
Yeah, I have a quick hack that I do. So I think in the first year I was getting half a dozen messages a week from folks who said, "Oh, you've been doing fractional consulting. I'm thinking about doing it. I would love to pick your brain." So my friend Deb Liu, who actually has a weekly Substack that she writes, she was like, instead of saying yes to all those conversations, say yes to one of those conversations, record the call, and then we'll turn it into thought leadership, a blog post that I'll guest publish you. And then in the future, if anybody has that question, you can just send them the blog post. It's like, hey, I've already answered it here in my blog post. If there's anything more specific, that I haven't addressed yet, please let me know. And 90% of the time, that's sufficient enough. And they kind of got the hint too, that like, that my time is valuable, and that really it has to be something that like they can't just find from like content that they can get online. So that helps a lot. And so that forces me to also write down, like, again, it's all a flywheel. Like it builds, like as I get new questions, I'll like write it down. I'll publish the second blog post or the third blog post. And now I have content that I can send around as needed.
That's great. That's great. And I think this one's the last one. Imola asked like if we wish to start portfolio career earlier, or is there an ideal life stage? I know we talked about this last time, how that we also presented. Do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think that like it's so interesting that Yasi and I are a few years apart. I was 2000, she was at HBS 2013. So you guys can do the math. But I don't think that for myself, I would have been able to start a portfolio career earlier. I think I probably didn't have the confidence and the network. And so to me, it made sense to start it when I did. And even then, right, it was really scary, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like, what if I fail? What if I can't get business, etc. And you kind of have to figure out how to get past the imposter syndrome, saying like, okay, like, I can do this, it's time for me to better myself. For me, I recruited a business partner because I didn't want to be lonely in this business, and I wanted to have a thought partner and somebody to share the work in. And so I just started doing baby steps to just sort of like what Yasi said, just, take one step of progress, but have the belief and the confidence that I could do this. But I started when I was 49. And Yasi, you started earlier. So why don't you share a little bit about how you thought about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say it really depends on the person and what we talked about earlier with Katie's question. What's your competitive advantage and what are you trying to do, right? Yes, some people could start earlier. We see some founders build multi-billion-dollar businesses without even starting, working in any company, right? So the answer is yes, it's very much possible. Depends on the person, right? And depends on your, your approach. What do you want it to do? For instance, like a lot of my superpower and strength was content generation. So I started having hundreds of thousands of people following me on LinkedIn. So like almost 5 years ago, I wanted to do what I'm doing right now, right? But I got pulled into different opportunities and I did that. And then I wanted to do a second time about 4 years ago when I started my previous job. And I started actually with them with consulting. I started at Clear with consulting. I put a strategy in place, and our CEO was like, no way, you can't leave me here, like you need to come help execute this. We love this strategy, you need to join us. So I ended up joining. So I kind of tried to do it a couple of times, but I got pulled into something that also piqued my interest. But this time I was like, I'm going to commit to this and then let's figure this out. And sometimes like I'm, in a bad days, I'm like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, why am I doing this? Let's go back to my traditional path. And still like, I feel like I'm very much interested in solving this problem. But I think different people can do it in different stages. But as Ha mentioned, like you need to have your competitive advantage and angle. Could be content, could be you're just really awesome in presenting. You might be your network, it might be your innovation and kind of technical capabilities. It really depends on what path you're trying to take, but you need to have an angle to stand out and be able to kind of create that business and flywheel and bring customer, keep customer, or if you have audience that you're serving every day, have ideas to serve them, so yes, possible, figure out how, right? And I think that's a good place to end. Everything is possible. It's all about how we execute and how we approach it. I very much appreciate everyone's time, particularly my co-presenter Ha and all of you. I know you're extremely busy. You have many places you can be and spend your time. And it truly feels an honor to have you kind of spend an hour to talk with us about this. And I'm curious, like, to learn how, as you go and do it, like send us sometimes random notes and say, hey, you talked about this a year ago and this is where I ended up. And what I'm doing is always inspirational and personally gets me going for doing these types of things. And hopefully it has impact along the way on people's and their decision. Thank you so much again, Deborah and Lexi. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank you. Thank you both. And I'm sorry I couldn't join right in the beginning, but anyway, it's fantastic. And you gave such great advice. And even for all the years I've been doing different things like this, I still learned new things.
Oh, thank you, Deborah. That was so sweet. Please do connect with us on LinkedIn. If we can be a resource to you, and especially when I do these things, I'm much, much more likely to respond to folks who reach out after having attended a session than just reaching out cold. So please connect with us. And if we can be helpful in your journey, let us know. And thank you for spending the time.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Enjoy your day.
Bye, everyone.